Hello fellow tankers, this is Dauntless, and welcome to an episode of Beginner's Guide. For this episode, I'll be covering the general characteristics of vehicle types, or vehicle classes if you will, and how it can affect your playstyle in the game. So moving right in, we're going to start with tank destroyers. Tank destroyers are a class that I think that anyone just starting this game should start with. This is because tank destroyers will really hone your shooting skills without really having to worry about moving too much. For example, if you play like the T110 E4, it's not the most mobile tank, and while it can be played like a heavy tank sometimes, the gun on most tank destroyers are very high alpha. They do 750 damage on average for most of the vehicles that are at tier 10, and even at like tier 8 some of the vehicles do get that 750 alpha. So in general, compared to all the other classes, tank destroyers boast very high damage per shot and also very high penetration, meaning that if you're a beginner, you don't really have to aim as well as at weak spots, and if you do hit, you're going to do a lot of damage and cause a lot of havoc inside of that enemy's vehicle. So that's why I think that when you're a beginner, you should start at tank destroyers, because the armor can be forgiving and really it focuses on being able to shoot accurately in the game because of its lack of mobility and in a lot of cases a lack of a turret. Tank destroyers do not have, in most cases, a turret, and because of that you end up having to traverse your entire tank to aim its gun. And while a lot of tank destroyers can traverse its gun by itself a little bit, for the most part you're going to have to move its entire tank in order to shoot, making this class a very sniping slash camping vehicle class. And again, when you're new to this game, I would recommend grinding your first tier 10 as a tank destroyer just so you can get the hang of being able to shoot. So the next class we'll take a look at are the heavy tanks. Heavy tanks are the vehicles that you're going to be going to next, usually when you get really comfortable with using tank destroyers and you have a good feel for how to use the gun, how to aim, how to lead targets. You know, you're really good at shooting now, and you want to take the the battle more to the brawling, the more of the forefront, and have more of a sway on the battle. Heavy tanks should be the natural progression to your grind for your next tier 10 vehicle. Heavy tanks usually, in general, boast very good frontal armor and decent mobility, as well as the second highest alpha guns in the game, next to tank destroyers. So you're going to be losing some values with the gun in terms of penetration and alpha damage and whatnot, but you're going to gain a turret, and you're also going to gain better mobility, and this will allow you to brawl in the city. In my opinion, heavy tanks, when you play them, will teach you how to use your armor more effectively, allow you to figure out how to engage enemies and how you should be playing. And playing this class will really teach you about how to use your armor. So the next class we'll take a look at is the medium tank class. Once you get good at shooting with the TDs, you get good at using your armor with the heavy tanks, your next progression should be medium tanks. I recommend something Soviet like this Object 430 just because the armor is quite forgiving and it is a fun tank to play. Medium tanks really teach you about tank mobility. You're kind of getting to the point in a heavy tank where you're like, okay, this is fun, but I wish I was that much faster to be able to get back to base when they were capping, or be able to climb a hill or flank an enemy. Well, at that point, you're ready to become a medium tank player. Medium tank players are the class, I believe, that has the most sway in the battle because of its ability to relocate. And it really does teach players on how to be flexible and how to be map aware on where you're needed the most and where you could have the most outcome. Where it doesn't take you 2 hours to get from point A to point B like a heavy tank or a tank destroyer, you can zip across there and actually get there in time to save the base or to, flank an enemy before all your allies are killed. So medium tank players are usually the best in game if they're played correctly, and this should be your natural progression from heavy tanks. After you've mastered the medium tank, a lot of players like myself will graduate towards light tanks. This is interesting because light tanks actually only go up to tier 8 at the moment, even though Wargaming has announced recently that they're going to bring in tier 10 light tanks, which is super exciting for me because I just adore light tanks. Light tanks, unlike medium tanks, have 0 armor. They give up pretty much all their armor value for the fact that they are extremely fast. And they have high view range, meaning they can light targets for artillery and all your other allies. This class, you really have to play like you have no HP, and it's very hard for you to have an impact on the game if you don't play it correctly because you have no armor whatsoever. Your firepower is kind of lackluster, and you get put into games that are 1 tier higher than you as a rule of thumb. Your matchmaking is +3 instead of +2 like all other vehicles, giving this vehicle class kind of a handicap, if you ask me. While they are extremely fun to play, a lot of players do not know how to play them right, and they end up just going into a game, dying within the first couple minutes, having no positive outcome on the game, and they don't realize that if you play it right and you stay alive towards the very end, you can have a huge impact on the game. So light tank vehicles are my favorite class in the game, and this should be the natural progression after you've really got everything you could get out of medium tanks. Playing a light tank is very, very rewarding, and it's really a challenge trying to carry in a tier 5 light tank like this ELC right here in a tier 8 game. It's really fun. And the last class that I'll take a look at is kind of the odd one out, is the SPG class. I don't really play a lot of artillery just because it's kind of something that I play when I'm having a bad day playing my normal tanks and I'm losing a lot and I just want to sit back and just snipe things for the heck of it and let my team carry me. It's a class that has a lot of controversy behind it, and it's just, I would recommend grinding one artillery line just for the experience of it. You can do this in between other classes that you're playing. If you do play artillery, I would recommend downloading a mod called Battle Assistant. It puts a different perspective on the view that you have as a tank destroyer, or I'm sorry, as an artillery, and it actually lets you follow the path of projectile of the bullet instead of looking straight down at your enemies. And in my opinion, it makes it a lot easier to aim. SPGs, again, the reason I would recommend grinding it is because it will give you an idea of what artillery can see per map. If you have enough games in artillery, you'll start to notice areas on the map that are open to artillery fire, as well as just how artillery players play in general, their strengths, their weaknesses. It'll just give you that experience. While I wouldn't recommend just playing only artillery or playing a lot of artillery, generally having that experience will allow you to become a more rounded player. And that's it, guys. Hopefully you found this guide useful. I know it was a really fast, overgeneralized review of all the tank classes. And again, these are just general characteristics. There are heavy tanks that have no armor. There are tank destroyers that have good mobility. You know, there's always the odd one out. But in general, do your research before you go into a tier 10 tank that you want to get. Check out my nations guide that I'll be putting up in a couple days, and that might give you a better idea of what tanks you want to grind for. But in general, this is the progression that a lot of players take, and it's something that I would recommend if you want to progress in the game without being overly frustrated. Anyway, if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up down below. And if you subscribe to my channel, there'll be more content like this coming in the near future. Again, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you guys later.